many miles and the too little smiles, I still remember you.
When people tend to think of dangerous professions in the city, they think of being a policeman, they think of being a fireman, but very seldom do they think of another profession which may be equally as dangerous, that of being a cab driver. Well, tonight we've got with us a number of people who are cab drivers in the Boston area, the Cambridge area, the whole area around Boston, and we're going to find out from them just what it's like driving a cab in the city. Terry?
Ron, we also have Teddy Klein, who for the last 25 years has been a cab driver and now recently edits the Taxi News Digest. We're going to ask him just how dangerous is it to drive a cab in the city. We'll be back to meet Teddy Klein after this message. This is Forum 38.
The views and opinions expressed on Forum 38 are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of WSBK-TV and or the Storer Broadcasting Company. Forum 38 is pre-recorded.
Through the too many miles and the too little smiles, I still remember you.
This is Forum 38. I'm Terry Zulis. We're talking about violence in taxi cabs in the city of Boston. There are 10,000 taxi drivers in the city. There are 1,500 licensed cabs. Last year, there were over 250 robberies of taxi drivers. And over the last 3 years, there have been 4 murders, one just recently in a housing project here in the city. We have as our guest to help us look at that issue of violence in the cab drivers and the cabs of the city, Teddy Klein, who's the editor of the Taxi News Digest and also has driven a cab or two. Hi, Teddy. How you doing?
Pretty well.
The question is, how dangerous is it in the city to drive a cab? How dangerous?
Well, it's dangerous in parts of the city. We have more holdups than we should have, but in effect, driving the hack is not as dangerous as we talk about, except for the fact that the holdups today, I think, are more vicious than they used to be years ago. When a man was held up years ago, he got held up, the robber took his money and let him go.
And now?
Today they get pistol whipped or they get stabbed or beaten, whatever you call it.
Are you saying it's not as dangerous now as it was 10 years ago?
Actually, it's more dangerous for injury. I don't know whether the number of holdups are any greater or any less, but the police tell me we have a lesser number of holdups in 1980 than we had in 1979. They claim that 1979 had a lesser number than 1978.
And I also read that in 1969 there were over almost 800 robberies.
In '69 we had a terrible rash of them. It was horrible.
Now what about the murder recently of a cab driver? There's only been 4 in the last 3 years. Now is that, I mean, anybody's death is terrible, but is there more chance of a cab driver in Boston getting hurt and getting maimed and getting killed now than there was 10 years ago?
It seems to be, that seems to be the norm of things now. I hate to say it.
What sections of the city are dangerous?
Well, it's a terrible way to put it, but it's Roxbury, Lower Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, in that whole area. Also, we find we have some troubles in South Boston and in Charlestown.
What kind of problems? Is it the robberies? Is it getting hurt?
It's a whole conglomerate. We have three ways of looking at it. A driver can get held up if the thief feels he didn't get enough money, or if he feels, let's say, vicious enough, he'll kill him. They'll take him to some project. And it seems why the passenger, whether he's in on the holdup or not, will get out and sometimes pay the bill. Then out of nowhere will come 3, 4, or 5 people and assault the driver for his money. I heard a driver tell me they asked him for his money before he could give it, they beat his roof in. Now, how else can you say it? I don't know how else to put it.
Well, let's hear from other people. That we have an audience full of cab drivers. Let's hear what they have to say.
Gary,
I just want to make a comment
Constantine?
that in 1969, there might have been more robberies, but more robberies were being reported. Today, we're not reporting them and they're happening.
Are you saying it's more dangerous than now?
The danger is present then as it is now, except then the police were responding more effectively than they are now.
Are you afraid to drive a cab? I mean, the way he describes it sounds like a nightmare. Are you afraid?
Are you afraid to cross the street? No.
But I mean, he's describing people going into housing projects, being beaten,
Some
getting...
go in, some don't go in. I've had all my problems in South Boston.
You mean in a white area of town?
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like when he was describing Roxbury and
Oh, you
Dorchester...
have problems in Roxbury. You have problems with anywhere, but most of them in South Boston. In the project areas of South Boston.
What kind of problem did you have there?
Kids running out in the fairs.
Have you ever been beaten as a cab driver?
No.
How long you been driving?
14 years.
You drive at night as well?
Yeah.
How about you?
I tend to disagree. I think that most taxi drivers who are out here working in the streets have to have fear in them or they will be hurt.
You have fear in you?
I fear every person that gets in my cab. I look them over well. And consequently, for a female who's only been on the streets 3 years, I really have not had any problems. But I drive 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I drive 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. I drive anytime. The only problem I've ever had has been in the daytime. But I do drive with fear because if I am on guard, then I am going to protect myself.
Wait a minute, let me ask you a question. You said that when somebody gets in your cab, you look them over very carefully. What do you look for? You can't turn somebody down, can you?
I think you find that most taxi drivers learn very quickly once they get out here how to look at a person and be a pretty good judge, especially if you're going to be a full-time taxi driver and work these streets and enjoy it.
What do you look for? I want to know what you look for when you look at a person, because now, unless I'm wrong, a cab driver's not allowed to turn down a fare, is he? Or she?
There are many ways of quickly disposing of a very undesired fare, not once they've jumped into the cab, but there are many ways of watching what's coming to your cab. There's very undesirable. Somebody walks out towards you at the airport. They're young, they're dressed pretty tough, and they have no luggage. They're wearing dark glasses, and they're kind of sauntering all over the place, and you don't want them.
So what do you do?
What do you do? I think that we're finding at the airport now...
Do you turn them down?
You can't turn down, but dispatchers are helping us out more with this type of fear because there have been problems out of the airport with people who don't come out with luggage, especially young and, I say, especially black.
Okay. Wait a minute. I want to follow up on that for especially black. What do you mean by that?
There's been many, many instances of very late at night, later at night especially, that a couple of young black boys will come. They probably come to the airport on the MTA. And
looking for trouble is what you're saying?
Or maybe they're stuck on Revere Beach. They have no money to get home. Let's off over to the airport, get a cab, and we'll follow it up from there. Whatever they say to themselves.
Okay. Can I have you stand up for a minute?
You asked if we turn down fares or things like that. The law may say one thing, but we get so little support from the police, we have to defend ourselves. If someone comes up to my cab and I don't like their looks, I'm not going to take them, and I don't care if the police tell me, I don't care if I go to jail. I'd rather go and get a Hackney violation than wind up in Boston City Hospital.
All right, so in other words, what you're saying is you break the law, but what do you mean when you say that the police don't back you up? How don't they back you up?
The police quite usually take the attitude that the cab drivers are the lowest form of life on the street and everyone is above them. And the police want...
Sounds like you have a lot of support in that position. How do they do that? I mean, how does that manifest itself? I mean, do they not answer calls? Do they not come and help you when you need?
Well, response time to a Hackney driver in trouble is really low, but the perfect example is if you're having a hassle with a fare, they pull up, they immediately assume that you are wrong, you are trying to rip the fare off, and this guy is in the right, and they take you down and dress you down, and they make him look like...
Can you be specific? Has that ever happened to you? And if so, can you tell me the story?
Well, it's happened to me a couple times, and I drive a lot in Brighton and in Allston, and sometimes in Brighton and Allston it's usually very quiet, which is why I drive there, but sometimes we get a fare and they're pretty drunk and we don't have to transport.
Give me an example of when the police didn't back you up when you were in serious trouble.
Well, it wasn't serious trouble. It could have been serious trouble. There were two people who wanted to go deep into Mattapan late at night. I didn't want to go deep into Mattapan late at night. The police made me leave the stand, which is I had waited about an hour to be topped there. If anybody ever drives in Brighton, they know that story. And I had waited about an hour. They made me leave the stand. They wrote me up for a Hackney violation because I wouldn't take these two guys who refused to tell me where they were going, who refused to give me even a show of faith, show me that they had money. I wasn't even asking for it. They wouldn't even show me.
You got no support from the police
on that? No support at all.
that?
They just told me to go away, and they kicked me off the stand.
Okay.
As a dispatcher for Red and White Cab, okay, we've run into instances before where, you know, a driver would call, say, well, a guy beat me for $3, $3.50, whatever the case might be. We'd call the police. The police would respond in maybe a half hour, 45 minutes if they responded at all. And when they got there, the most they would do, occasionally you might get a cop that would go up there and say, well, you know, say to the guy, well, if you don't pay the fare, you know, you'll be under arrest and all that. But basically, they say there's nothing they can do. You know, turn around and say the most you can do is take them to small claims court and try to get your money that way.
So you really feel a lot of the problem, maybe in the danger of being a cab driver, is the police?
The police themselves? Yeah. I can give an example of going like off on a different subject of a guy from, you know, I wasn't dispatching, I happened to be in the room at the time when the guy called in about a stabbing at Dudley Station.
And what happened?
It's going back a couple of years now. The man was stabbed. There was repeated calls to the police. Okay, police never respond. Now Dudley Station is approximately a half a block from Station 2.
Do you think they do? Are you really saying they do it purposely?
Well, I'm not saying they did it purposely, but the ambulance never showed up and all that. The guy ended up being dumped in the back of a cab and taken to the city hospital. The complaint was made as to, you know, an inquiry was made as to why the police didn't respond to that call. They claimed that they never received it. And I know...
Well, you don't believe that?
No, I really don't believe that because I know that there was 4 or 5 calls made to the police and they claimed that there was no calls made at all.
Ron?
You agree with them?
Can I just interrupt you here? I want Teddy to tell me, he's been a cab driver for 25 years. Can you give me a personal experience where you've been robbed? I'd like to hear some personal experiences, Teddy.
I was robbed twice, once with a gun and once with a knife. In both cases, they took my money and left me alone.
How long ago was that?
Oh, good Lord, 30-odd years ago. I haven't driven a cab for over 20 years.
Now that's changed. Right now, you said earlier in the beginning of the show that now the violence perpetrated on cab drivers is cruel.
It's cruel and more vicious.
All right. Ron, can you ask some of the cab drivers if they had experiences like that?
Yeah, you come out here.
What I'd like to say is that you had expressed that in the past 10 years that we've been getting robbed in the same sections of the city 10 years ago as we're getting robbed in today. And also, at this time, we are having trouble with police response. In other words, even in Cambridge, it takes 30 minutes for a response from a police officer.
Are you a Cambridge driver, by the way?
Yes, I am. And was it like this 10 years ago? In other words, what was the police response back in the 50s and the 60s,
Well, the same, pretty much the same. By the time we got to a telephone then, we didn't have two-way radio then. By the time we got to a telephone or to a police station to report it, a half an hour had gone by. So we didn't get a much better response than what you're talking about.
Terry?
Ron?
We didn't have two-way radio.
Just recently, Boston police made us put what they call trouble lights on our cabs. Well,
what exactly are trouble lights?
They're two little orange lights we have on our roofs now. And when they're flashing, the police are supposed to respond. Me and some of my friends one night, for the fun of it, put them on. We went past cops, past everybody. They don't respond to the trouble lights. They say they do.
Do you think they saw the lights, or do you think they...
Yes, them.
So what you're really saying is the police absolutely saw your lights, knew you were in trouble, and didn't do anything?
That's right.
Why do you think...
We don't know why that's what they're doing. We like to have answers to a question like that. But you cannot get these answers from them.
Okay. Ron, I think we're going to have to take a break here. We're running short of time. We're talking about driving a cab in Boston and how violent is it. This is Forum 38. We'll be back.
somebody should mention, the police are gonna